All right, welcome back to another Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, we are finishing up after about a 2-week off break of finishing up our updates on Nords. I do apologize for the break, just had some stuff going on. I'm not going to get into it, but hey. So we're doing this. We're also going to be doing some other videos very shortly after this, but we're going to get finished through these Nords. Once they're done, since this is a faction got an overall change, that's probably when we'll go back and kind of talk about them overall, because I know I've heard a lot of back and forth, and depending on when you look, depends on whether people say they're great or whether or not they're terrible. But hey, that's the internet. That's what you read on the internet. Keep in mind, if you're looking to pick up this or anything else related to Conquest, we do have a discount code in the show notes below. It's Train Kickers, saves you 10%, helps us out as well, especially when you're looking at this holiday season. Someone, maybe even yourself, deserves to get some Conquest for the holiday, and hey, you might as well save a little money while you do so. All right, so what we've been doing for these different ones, we've went through the Mortals and the Half-Bloods. We're doing it by unit type. We're going to do the same thing for the Wadroon. Doing it this way because it's just easier. That way, not trying to make one giant video to talk about it all. I can do it, but I think sometimes those are a little bit tough to follow, especially if you're only looking for certain things. And remember, this isn't the pure deep dive. This is more discussing what the changes are, what I think those mean, and just some ideas around it. All right, well, let's take a look at... So for this, we're going to start with the special rules, as we did for each of these, just to make sure we're all on the same footing, and then we're going to talk about the Exalted units for this one. So they have 3 rules. They have in between either minorly changed or greatly changed. Ice, Flesh, and Blood is very, very similar. You can be inspired through hindering terrain, and terrain that hurts you, you're only taking half the wounds. Zonal terrain and all. It's effectively the same. They're moved a little bit, but they've altered a little bit of the way they do terrain. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's effectively the same. Blood of the Ahinyar is very, very different. It used to give you extra attacks once you've been wounded. Does very, very different things now. What it does is says, hey, when you charge, when you have a successful charge, whether it's your regiment, so counting command stand, or a monster, just counting the monster stand, you count as one additional stand for the purpose of seizing objectives for that zone. For that round. So ABC, always be charging. You want to be getting into your opponents, because if you charge equal with equal, you now have 1 extra, assuming that the command stand is actually the one touching. So 3v3, you're now really 4v3 for seizing purposes. Plus you charged in, so maybe you actually get the swing as well. But this also means there's some strategy in just pure move charges if that other unit has already went and you know you're not really in shape to be getting injured. I could just get in there and guarantee that it's mine now instead of theirs. Last one is Prophecy Unfulfilled. The first part isn't any different. If one of my units, or one of your friendly units, is already engaged with an enemy, anything that's not a monster gets +2 to the charge going against that enemy. So easier to get your charges onto already engaged opponents. The second part that's new is that when you've done a successful charge, +1 to your resolve. So this army lives and dies by charging. So be doing so. All right, so for Supremacy, we have 2 characters that we're going to talk about today. But only one of them has a Supremacy, because only one of them is allowed to be your Warlord. One other thing to say at the top, in case this... we'll get to in a second. So, the character that we got to talk about Supremacy for is Konagir. Konagir was a little bit different before. Used to give Terrifying, and if you successfully charged, what it does now is that Prophecy Unfulfilled changes that just says friendly regiments. So it was non-monsters would get this +2. Now it's all of them. So your monsters can get +2 as well. Since your monsters have, in general, a little bit of speed, not all of them, but a bit of speed, or, I don't know, maybe when you think of other monsters, maybe not as much speed. But since they have a little bit of speed here, it gets them a little bit extra. Now you can be sure that you get your monsters in, and your monsters have impact, so you can actually do some damage even if all you're doing is moving and charging. I think that's probably, depending on the list you run, if you're running monsters, very useful. If you're not, worse. Depends on what you're running. So what I want to mention that I didn't specifically say in the last 2, and I want to make sure this is very clear. When you look at your tribal tactics, only the Konagir and the Jarl are the ones who take tribal tactics. So when we were talking about it, you were talking about Ural supremacy, so it made sense that we're discussing all the ways he can use it, but you have to be taking these characters to be able to get it. Naturally, it's only the character's regiment, essentially, though the Ural has ways to make it much more than that. All right, so taking a look at this guy. Overall, his base stuff hasn't changed. He, of course, now has his types. I said he can take those tribal tactics. He no longer has the aspects, so they've changed that. The aspects before only affected the unit really anyway, but now they gave them a little bit different. Remember, you don't pick these until you're about to start the battle. You're at the table, you know what's going on. You can determine which one to do. We talked about them, but essentially you can get bonus on flanks. You can do better versus objectives, and I forget what direct assault does. Oh, they count as heavy. Yeah, heavy for objective markers. So that's the one that's good for objective markers. Opportunists, or take their flanks. If you hit them in the right spot, they can't seize. So yeah, you get bonus against depending on how you hit your opponent. If you have objectives, great thing to take. If you don't have objectives, the other ones are actually quite good, depending on what you're kind of worried about happening. But for this guy, that's about the main changes. Honestly, taking a look at him, that's it. Otherwise, he's essentially stayed the same. He used to be able to take 3 tropines. He's now 2 tropines, so he could take a little bit less. Although, that's probably fine. That might have been, I'm sure, honestly, knowing the way people did them in the past, that was a little bit much. Oh, he didn't have to do special rules before. Oh, he didn't have special rules before because his aspects gave him some of these rules. So he was Cleave 1 Terrifying, and now he has Impact. Sorry, so he does get some special rules, and they're similar to rules that he could have gotten in the past. But now you just have them base. So overall, better. I would say better. You're limiting a little bit of some of those choices, but they've lowered the amount of items anyway. So that means you're not as... It's harder to probably get 3 that you'd want, or they want to make sure you don't have that. Let's take about the Jotnar Cider. So, for this guy, he didn't exist before, so we're just going to talk about him very briefly. This is not the deep dive through him and the other monsters. I would like to do a Titan video, but that's not what this is. So he's 208 points. He's a medium. Big thing is he's 20 wounds on a defense 3, resolve 4, or evade 2 if you actually smack at him with any bit of cleave. He does have hardened 1, so you'd have to smack him with quite a bit of cleave, but you have that. He's set on a Clash 3 with 12 attacks. He is Cleave 2. He's Fearless Hardened 1. He's got 6 impacts. He's Tenacious 1. And he is also Terrifying. So 3s and 4s where he's auto going to pass 1 and he doesn't care about the negatives you're giving him because of Fearless. Quite strong. Alright, so Sees in the Future. Just talking about that very briefly here. Your Titans get Fearless while they're near an objective. So helps them survive out a little bit better, especially against someone with some Terrifying. Also, friendly Titan regiments ignore special effects of special rules or abilities that would have them count as less stance for purposes in objective zones, or none at all while currently contacted with any regiments. So you don't seize at less for any reason for your friendly Titan regiments. Notice it doesn't say other friendly, so this guy is a Titan himself. Crush an Avalanche. When you declare a charge while within 10 inches of him, you get Brutal Impact 1, which Brutal Impact's not really something you got, and 2 extra impacts. Until the end of the round. Doesn't stack, that's absolutely fine. Lord of Titans. Yeah, he's a character. Titan has the same normal restrictions that a lot of the other ones do, that he has character actions. Like the Fallen Divinity, in case you're not familiar. Has character actions, has regiment actions, counts as a monster, counts as a character. Does have the rule it has to take at least one other regiment's warband, so it's got to take at least one other Titan. And it's 6 stands for the purposes of objectives instead of the standard 3. He's just there by himself. He also has to take a weapon. He can either take an axe, which means if he put a wound on an objective marker, takes it out, or gets unyielding. So it kind of depends on what you see. If you got a lot of objectives, I would take the axe. Otherwise, I'm taking the spear. He can't take any other upgrades, and he can't be the Warlord. Which I thought at one point he was supposed to be, but they might change their minds about that. Mountain Jotnars are his mainstay, and the Ice and Sea are his restricted. If you want to run pure Titans, Okay, you can't exactly run pure Titans, but you can get pretty close. But if you want to run majority Titans, this guy is a great addition because he does buff them out, and he himself is quite a beatstick. He's at 280 points, so he's quite expensive, but he does a lot for that 280. Overall, I like him. I'm curious to see how much we see of them, especially, I know I've gotten some games in with this new update, but not enough yet. And the one problem I see, we don't have a great spot to get lots and lots of tournament data to be able to see what's happening. But overall, as someone who's more worried about having fun and being competitive, but not necessarily trying to, stomp everyone, I like this. All right, for upgrades, we were only really talking about the ones that were restricted in who could take them. So they had to be something that was only for one particular group. And when we're going through this, we see that really only occurs into the masteries. Remember, they redid a lot of the items, so there's both less items, more specialized items. They changed the way you can take them, so now with these keywords, you can lock it into the particular model or groups that you want to. So we've already talked about a little bit of these, but we want to talk about them anyway. We got the Lessons of the Jotunamur, because it's a Konagir or a Jarl, so essentially you have to be someone who can take those tribal tactics. And once per battle, at the beginning of this character's stand's activation, you can change your tribal tactics. So if you care about the objectives, but there's not too many, if you happen to have this thing, you could be using that, switch it out later. Or, and the other ones, I'm not sure if it's so great and wonderful for 30 points. I'm sure there is some really good uses, but I think it's super map dependent. And you've bought the mastery before you got there. And I think that's the problem. If you somehow weren't paying for this right away, it could be more useful, but you're kind of banking on the fact that the random mission that you get, unless you're not playing random missions, but the random mission you're going to get really wants you to switch, because otherwise you spent 30 points where you could have put on something else. And Wealth of 100 raids. The regiment gets Dauntless, that the character stands attached to. They get Dauntless. All right. Overall, for the same amount of points, I kind of prefer that one. Just for the simple fact that I can pretty much always use Dauntless. I may or may not be using switching. Those are the only ones that are just written to those characters. And I said, we just want to go through the ones that are only written to them. Hey, we don't have to worry about any spells, because none of these guys get spells. Actually, they do put the Ice Jotnar here. I wasn't sure, actually, I just thought about that. I wasn't sure if they put his spells here or otherwise, so let's take a look. Good, spells didn't change. The Ice Jotnar spells are identical to what they were before. So, I was worried about whether or not we could skip over them. We can't skip over them. All right, first unit we're taking a look at is Bowchosen. There's a very big back and forth on the internet of whether or not Bowchosen are good. I think Bowchosen are good. I think ranged in general is good. I think Bowchosen, though very expensive, are a great ranged unit that does quite a bit of good. However, there's obviously units that are better. These guys were helped, and I think their help really does put them at the top tier. For a very long time they were. Then people got kind of disenchanted with them, I think because of both points cost and a few other things. I'm a rather big fan of them again. One of the big reasons is they're now evade 2. So you used to be able to get in, and then you could stop them that way. But for a ranged unit, their Violent Clashes were both 3, and they are 4 attacks, which means they can fight in close combat. They're not necessarily destroying your beatstick unit, but you couldn't necessarily throw chaff into them. And with an evade of 2 means that you are more likely, even if someone does hit you with something heavier, you're saved just as good as it would have been otherwise. So overall, I really do like that. Other stats that they have not changed. There's still 5 attacks in shooting, I should say. Barrage of 5, 14 inches with their precise shot. And here's the other thing that they've done to buff them, which helps them out. They have War Brethren. Stands in this regiment gain the benefits of the tribal tactics the character stand, whose warband they're in, has selected. You can only go into, in case people aren't aware, just to make sure we're clear about this, they can put that rule because the only units that you can go in, or sorry, only characters who actually take them, we see the Konagir takes them as a mainstay, and the Jarl doesn't take them at all. My apologies. It's actually only the Konagir. I thought the Jarl might have taken them. Only Konagir, which means you're guaranteed to have a tribal tactic. Do any of the tactics actually do them any good? If you're within half range, hitting objective markers could be useful. So that is a little bit of something. This might be a spot where you want to do that switch, maybe. Getting Opportunist, if you do actually get to a flank of someone. Engaging them, take the flanks, possible. Not the best use for them, but if you're going to need those points, you could. But otherwise, draw them in. If that's the one you want to take, these guys actually do get helped by that if you can get onto the flank. Which, let's face it, that's something that you're trying to do potentially anyway, just for the bonuses. But if you liked Bow Chosen before, they're still good. If you didn't, I think they are a bit better. And I don't know, I've always liked them. I know that one of the problems is you get into an argument of, do they make their points back? I don't see that nearly as much in this game as we do some other games, but that's a spurious argument in my mind. Because getting your points back, the idea of earning your points back is fine, but the way in which you earn your points back, I think, is the issue that people have. A lot of times people think of getting your points back in terms of what you destroy. Getting your points back, especially in this game, is what did you destroy? What did you break at the right time that now can't grab the objective that they're on? What did you weaken enough for one of your other units to get into? What did you speed bump for long enough that was going to be going somewhere you didn't want to? Because let's face it, your opponent's going to get into the units you don't want them to sooner or later kind of ideas. Did you speed bump them for long enough? Yeah, you went down, but hey, did you stick around for a while? That argument gets much, much more difficult to have, which I think is fine. But I think sometimes when people look at it and say, oh, I don't like what these guys do you not like what they do, or do you not think they do enough? And to me, I think they can do enough. But I'm partial to them. So, and again, I'm not trying to ultra game a list kind of thing. Maybe we'll do that at one point. We'll sit down and we'll try to build like the most insane list we can come up with for some stuff. A unit that we haven't seen yet, but will be out hopefully not too distant future, maybe this upcoming year, is the Steel Chosen. So they are now Steel Chosen instead of Blade Chosen. Same exact idea. They are now cheaper. So when you're remaking them this much, to me, that sounds like hopefully then they're coming out in the not too distant future. They used to be 210. They're sitting at 180 now. They're 60 a stand instead of the 70, so a bit cheaper overall. You'll notice they only take the Shield Biter upgrade, but they have the Standard Bearer for free, so you're saving an extra 15 points on this. And they have Flurry, same thing they had before. Their Impact went down by one. They used to be Impact 3, they're Impact 2 now, but they also have Line Breaker. That's actually really nice. What you often see sometimes, you have units with like good cleave and line breaker, which is, okay, assuming someone doesn't have great evade, is good, but it kind of feels like overkill almost. I'm already cleaving through quite a bit, and I'm also removing your shield or bastion or all these other things. It helps guarantee that those units get through people, but a unit without any buffs that just has a base of line breaker means that now I'm less worried about going against those shielded opponents. Those opponents that used to say before be sitting on 4s. Now I'm putting you on 3s. Maybe you had Bastion as well, so maybe now you're sitting on 2s. You're much less defensive, and I'm just going to try to take you down with the weight of attacks, because we are sitting now at 6 attacks, where they used to be 5. They're faster, move 6, that's pretty common. Pretty much everyone in this army went to base 6s instead of the 5s. And more wounds. No, sorry, my apologies. Blade Chosen were not. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. Blade Chosen were 6 attacks as before. They are still. They actually went down a wound. They used to be 6 wounds. They're now 5 wounds. They are that bit faster, like I said. They actually got an evade, so that's nice at least. They're not out yet. I always find it a little bit hard to talk about units that we haven't seen at all yet in terms of haven't necessarily played against them or played them. Overall, though, for a spot that this army maybe didn't have, pretty useful. If because of who will take them, you're looking at Konagir, stuff like that. So actually the Konagir takes them. Does anyone else take Exalted? A good question to ask. So we just checked. Jarl takes them as restricted. You have Konagir as mainstay. So if you're kind of sticking more to them, then you are getting some useful bits out of it for sure. So overall, I do like them. Anyone with Flurry with a base of 3 or could go up to 4s with 6 attacks, Linebreaker, you're going to get some decent results out of them. They probably were not worth 210, especially what they have. They're probably worth about the 180 now. I can see that working. I wouldn't necessarily take a whole bunch of them, but a little 3-pack I think could be fun. After that, it just goes straight to your big boys. So there's very few units that are Exalted that aren't your 2 characters or your monsters. But hey, that makes it a little bit easier for us. So, take a look at the Sea Jotnar, still sitting the same amount of points, still sitting at the same exact stats, no real change there. The attack stayed the same, cleave 2 still a Fiend Hunter, still terrifying, has impact 5, which remember, if you are taking the Cider, you could be now with Brutal 1 and impact 7. And you have your free volley. So overall, honestly, no difference. Still good. Sea Jotnars were really, really strong. Sea Jotnars are still very, very strong. Mountain Jotnar. Mountain Jotnar went up a bit. So it went up by 20 points. I know there's some people who said this is all garbage. Let's talk about how this goes. Since still at the move 7, still the clash 3, got 2 more wounds. So now sitting at 18 wounds. So good bit more survivability. Has a cleave of 2, has terrifying, hardened 1. So more likely to be on that better save with the impact of 6. 2 extra wounds for hardened 1. And 20 extra points for hardened 1 and 2 more wounds. Yeah, overall probably worth it depending on what people are doing. If you like them before you're taking them, if you're taking, the Cider, you're taking this guy anyway because you do need. He's the only mainstay, and you do need another one or a Titan to go with him. Otherwise, he's fine. If you bought the previous starter set, you got at least one of these, and there's a good number of people who might have 2 of them. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're great and wonderful, at least kind of like looking at it, but I've watched them and they can perform quite well, especially because you get to ignore some of the things that used to stop inspireds and things like that. So if you position yourself well, you may be able to get buffs or bumps that other people can't. So overall, I like them. I like the giant monsters though, but giant monsters or monsters in general usually always underperform the equivalent point in brutes because yes, they're there until they go away, but they tend not to be able to survive quite as well or get ganged up on a little bit different way. But I don't know, I like him. Ice Jotnar, he is 10 points cheaper. He is looking at the same exact stats that he had before. He's still his Priest 5. He's still got Cleave 3. He's still terrifying. He's no longer unstoppable. That's actually a pretty big downgrade. And Impact 6. He gets his free spellcasting action just like he did before. That's honestly probably the biggest downside with these, and it's true of a lot of monsters. You don't have natural buff of unstoppable, which means you could always fail those charges. Overall, he's 10 points cheaper. Losing unstoppable, no. I will pay 10 points to get unstoppable. I'm not going to say he's bad or anything like that. I don't think he's at that level, but I liked him before. I liked him more before. He has been downgraded. Losing unstoppable, I would take unstoppable in any of my monsters for 10 or maybe even 20 points. Because there's many times when I'm like, it's a 3-inch charge, or maybe even a 2-inch charge. I've had this before too, and miss it. Or a 3-inch charge, you roll the 1 or 2. Now here's your 240, 250, 260 point unit. That does nothing. So he's worse overall. All right. That is actually it for the units that are Exalted. So, if you're, say you have the older pack, which had a Kona gear, had Bow Chosen, had a Mountain Jotnar, I think overall you came out a little bit ahead at least. Maybe not hugely. The Kona gear is, for more recent, is better because he actually has some special rules. He can take a little bit less stuff, but that's okay. He's getting some rules that kind of cover that. You have your Bow Chosen, which are getting the similar rules to him because they have a rule to do so. Steel Chosen are not yet. Steel Chosen / Blade Chosen, depending on when you have looked at this. They're not out yet. And your Titans are fun. I don't know if trying to run as many Titans as you can is necessarily amazing. But I think it's a fun, viable, if not super competitive, viable. As always, we're not trying to go for the most competitive things. All right, well, that does it for the last big changes to the Nords. So next up is going to be Wadroon. Once they are done, then we're going to go through and talk about maybe the factions just in general, but also talk about where I think they sit for new players or power levels. Now, I will preface this by saying, and this is true for all things, it is always partially dependent upon the meta you're in, the people that you see play, the things that you've seen happen, all of that. So if you go to 10 different people in 10 different areas, your power level sort of thing is probably going to vary, because someone who says, that unit nut's garbage, here's why it's all garbage. Yeah, but there's a player in my area who's really gotten good at using them and using them very effectively, and he makes them outperform, or someone else who makes them underperform. So that's always, it's a tough argument to have, because there is no definitive, this is the right answer. And anyone who tells you that, they are wrong if they think it's truly definitive. There can be definitive bad, but I think good is so dependent upon such a variety of factors that's very tough to actually determine. What do I think of the Exalted changes, though? I'm happy with them. I know, speaking of the army just as a whole, real quickly, I've heard some spots from players that I know who are saying, hey, you know what? I like what they did. We're a bit faster. We've solidified in what we want to do. We are charging. We are trying to time things correctly. You're going to take down this unit. That's fine. I've got the objective this turn. And when you take out my raiders next turn, who cares? Because now I have a Jotnar to come in and hit you. I'm getting the things that I want. Or I'm going to put trolls into you, and you're just going to sit there for a while. And then I have these other units to make sure that I can grab this objective, because now you're stuck. And I've heard other people say, oh, well, here's all this thing that we're garbage tier. And the truth is honestly probably somewhere in between. Do I think they're bad? No, I really don't. I personally don't think any of the factions are actually actively bad. Do I think Nords... Okay. Has it helped solidify their gameplay? Yes. They have a much stronger identity of what exactly it is that they do. I think in some ways that identity now has been this razor's edge has been honed to, has become much more the double-edged sword. What I mean by that, you are much better when you are charging and when you're getting things, but that does mean you need to be set up correctly. That means you need to be positioned correctly. That means if your opponent is outmaneuvering you, that you might be in trouble, because maybe they're staying outside of some decent charge ranges. Maybe they're putting themselves in a spot where, you'll get the charge. Yeah, but I'm stacked up, and as soon as you do that, I have a unit that'll go and I'll take you out, kind of thing. Predictability sort of pieces. So they have a much better identity, but they are still 100% glass cannons. Even being a little bit faster kind of makes it a little bit more so, because now you have their units in front, which might be outpacing the units that are coming on, say, 2 rounds later. If you have certain light units that are pushing forward real fast, well, if they don't get the job done for long enough, which might be just, say, holding up the opponent or something like that, they might be that much further ahead, which means your other units aren't positioned to help out quite as quickly. Yeah, they're faster as well, but this other unit maybe got 2 rounds on them. So your other unit's trying to play catch up, and your extra couple inches you've moved got you within range of me. So overall, I like it. I think anyone who is saying all doom and gloom, I think they're wrong. I think you can absolutely still have fun with them. But anyone saying that they are, absolutely crazy in every way, no. But I like what they've done for them. But I'll be honest, so far I've liked pretty much most of their changes, little bits here and there. But I think every faction has been brought better in a line, even if what they did didn't make you better. Because maybe it didn't make you better because you didn't need to be better. But that'll do it for this particular video, and that gives some overview of them in general. Next thing you're going to see is Wadroon. I'm actually probably going to be trying to record those now. If I don't get them to them right now, then you will see a little bit of maybe a different color gray shirt, and it might be a little bit brighter or darker, but then if not today, they're being done tomorrow. I do apologize for there being a bit delay. There's some things that go on. I'm not going to get into what they were, but things are at least better for the moment. And trying to get back to more of this, because this is what I want to do. And I want to get through all these updates, because then I want to talk about some other stuff. And I do want to talk about some other games as well, especially Trench Crusade. A bunch of us are the local store I go to. Actually, about 2 of them. We are all in on that stuff. So I do want to actually discuss that a bit as well as we wait for some STL so my printer can go burr. I had to go back because I did my outro incorrectly. On behalf of everyone on the show, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.